Hello and welcome. I'm here on motorcycle riding again, giving the last last report about the ride out to Bungonia. So I'm on the I'm on Lumley Road again, and I'm riding back towards the village of Bungonia. You might remember in the last video I came to the end of Lumley Road, came to a part of Lumley Road which was a dirt road, and I needed to turn around. So I was talking a bit about the need for a reverse gear on the bike. I have a new microphone here, so I feel a bit like John Laws. For those of you who are old enough to remember, John Laws was a radio announcer well before Alan Jones thought he was the king of Sydney radio. There was a bloke called John Laws who did a similar thing. He worked on talkback radio, and he was on every radio station in Sydney at one stage. I think he worked for 2UE, 2UW, 2SM, a whole bunch of stations when they only had AM stations and talkback radio, and he worked for all of them. And he was the king of talkback radio at one stage, and whenever he wanted the minister on the line, he'd just tell his producer to call the minister, and the minister would take his call and he'd berate the minister about whatever it was that somebody had rung up and talked about. But he always was referred to as the king of the golden microphone, and he actually had a gold microphone in the studio that was exclusively his, and no one else was allowed to use it, of course, because no one else was held such an exalted position. And so for many years, I can't remember how many, but many years, he was the king of Sydney radio, and certainly the king of talkback radio. And although my microphone is black, I feel a bit like him with his golden microphone. Now, I don't know anything about microphones or any of those sort of things, so I'll just, for those who are interested in the technical details, I'll just tell you a little bit about this. It's called a Blue Yeti, Y-E-T-I, professional multi-pattern USB mic for recording and streaming. Some of the technical specifications are power required 5 volts, sample rate 45 kilohertz, bit rate 16-bit, capsules blue proprietary 14mm condenser capsules. Then it goes on about polar patterns, I don't know what they are, frequency response 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, sensitivity 4.5 meters //PA at 1 kilohertz, maximum SPL 120 dB, and then it talks about how long, high, and so on it is. And it has switchable polar patterns, stereo, omnidirectional, cardioid, and bidirectional. Now, I don't know what any of that means, but as I say, all the people who are technical people will no doubt know about that. So my children gave me this for a Christmas present. One of my daughters works in television, and she thought I could do with improving my audio and might improve the production values of some of my videos. So I'm testing it out here, and I hope it leads to an improved quality of audio, and therefore an improvement for those who are watching in the enjoyment of the videos. So as I said, I'm on Lumley Road, and I'm riding back towards Bungonia, the village of Bungonia, having got to the dirt road section of the Lumley Road and convinced myself that I'd gone the wrong way or got lost or whatever, and deciding not to want to ride on dirt roads, I turned around and headed back towards the village of Bungonia. The road here, as you can see, is in pretty good condition. The camera's not flapping around and shaking around a lot, so the road surface must be pretty good. There are markings in the middle of the road, and the road's reasonably wide. Obviously it's a C-class road, so it doesn't get a lot of traffic, and you don't expect it to be built like the motorway or a 2-lane dual carriageway, but it's still in pretty good condition, I reckon. You can see the tree line is fairly close to the edge of the road just here, and it's that kind of open woodland that I was talking about earlier, in that you can see trees along the edge of the road, as I've just said, but beyond them it's often just sort of open grassland and pasture. Some of that is farming and agricultural land that belongs to farmers, and some of it's just crown land that sort of belongs to the government and is not used at all at the moment. one or two cars passing me at the moment, so there is a little bit of traffic on this road, and maybe the people who are going in the opposite direction are going the right way to get to Tarago. But as I said, I got a bit disoriented or confused about where I was, and I certainly don't want to take my bike on any long dirt road sections. It's just being a cruiser bike, it's not really built for going on those sort of roads, so it's best to avoid them if possible. I should say at this point I'm recording this audio, although I took the video on I think the 9th of December. I'm recording the audio now on the 26th of December, so that's Boxing Day, and it's overcast and miserable here, and it's rained 2 or 3 times, so not the sort of weather that we generally associate with Christmas in Australia. It's summertime. I suppose we're all a bit glad that it's not 35 or 40 degrees. I was able to have Christmas with some of my children yesterday, some who live in Sydney, one of my daughters and my granddaughter and son. My other daughter, who also lives in Sydney, her daughter, who's just turned 18 and finished high school this year, has tested positive to the dreaded Omicron, or whatever it's called, version of the virus. Although she was double vaxxed and all that sort of stuff, in the period while she was doing exams or something, one of the teachers tested positive, and so all the children who had been in, all the students who had been in her class had to be tested, and the granddaughter's now isolating in the upper story of the house, and my daughter and her husband have both been tested and tested negative, but they went back, I believe, today for a second test, and I guess they're waiting on the results of that. So we all probably wish we were never talking about this Omicron variant or anything else to do with this COVID thing ever again, but it appears it's going to be a feature of our lives for a little while longer, and it's almost inevitable now, according to the New South Wales State Health Minister Brad Hazzard, that at some point everybody's going to get this thing. So I guess the double vaccine and maybe even the booster shot are going to mean that if you do get it, it's not going to be a very bad dose and you're going to be okay, but nevertheless it's going to cause you some inconvenience and you're going to be sniffling and snuffling and maybe have a sore throat or something like that for a little while. So hopefully it's not the fate of anybody who's watching this video or anyone who subscribes to my channel. So far I'm lucky enough to say I'm clear of the virus. You can see the road here is a little better. There are markings down the centre, and there's also markings on the edge of the road. I always think those markings are helpful to show you where the edges of the road are. I mean, it's not that important during the daytime, of course, but at night time it's helpful to give you a sense of where the edge of the road is, and especially if you need to pull over to the side and drop your stand or something like that. A lot of those things are not important to drivers because you've always got 4 wheels to support you, but if you're needing to pull over to the side of the road for something to do with fixing your bike or an emergency, or you need a nature stop or whatever, it's good to know where the edge of the road is, and sometimes you can put your bike just on the shoulder and drop the stand and you still have a little bit of road surface left rather than the gravel or the soft mud or whatever it is that's going to be on the side of the road. I think I've mentioned in previous videos that the people who live in the village of Bungonia, which we've gone through now, are very unhappy about the idea that there's going to be a bioreactor built in their area. Now, a bioreactor is a place where plastic and protrusible waste is burned, and the gases that are captured from that waste are used to generate electricity. The argument from those people is, well, we don't want that in our neighbourhood. The smell will be awful. Not a great thing to have right on the edge of a national park in any case, I wouldn't think. But also there's an argument for saying, well, if the waste is generated in Sydney, which is where the waste will come from, isn't it better that it be disposed of in Sydney rather than paying the cost of freighting it 200 kilometres to Goulburn and then putting it in trucks off the trains, which is how it would get here, come down on the rail and then have to be put in trucks and driven out to this bioreactor of some sort where it will be burned. And as I say, the gases are captured and turned into electricity. I mentioned in a previous video that there's just out of Tarago, between Tarago and Bungonia, there's a intermodal bioreactor that belongs to Viola. Viola are waste product handlers, and it takes protrusible waste, which is waste that will eventually decompose and rot, and allows it to allows it to do that, decompose and rot, and it somehow captures the methane that's generated from that rotting garbage and turns it into electricity. So it allows the waste collecting company to have some green credentials, and it creates, I wouldn't say renewable energy, but it creates energy from waste rather than from coal or something like that. But the people who live out at Tarago complain that the smell is offensive, and it's sometimes in the day it's just not safe to go outside because it smells so bad. So I guess you can understand, if you live in a small village like this, in this sort of countryside, you don't necessarily want this kind of thing in your own backyard. Some argument might be put for saying, well, it's a handful of people who live in Bungonia who are going to be inconvenienced by the smell, and so on, as opposed to the tens of thousands, if not millions, who would be inconvenienced by the smell and the lack of the ugliness of the building itself if it was built in Sydney. And yes, I can see that argument, but I can also see the argument that I think is far more important, that we just can't continue to burn rubbish. We have to find ways to reduce the amount of rubbish that we have in the first place, and create less waste. And I know I've mentioned this in an earlier video, that supermarkets in Goulburn, and I imagine it's the same everywhere else now, have a system, mostly it's near the self-serve checkouts, where you can return all soft plastic waste. So the Glad wrap that comes around the meat, those little foil packets that chips and Doritos and those sort of snack foods come in, and just about any other plastic waste that you scrunch up, like Glad wrap, can be returned to the supermarket. Now what happens to it after that, I'm not sure. Maybe they send it to these people who then burn it, or maybe they send it to warehouse it somewhere, I don't know, or at one stage I believe it was shipped overseas. But returning it is certainly better than sending it to landfill, but somehow we have to find ways to reduce that amount of waste in the first place. This video is going to end in about a minute and a bit, and we're not going to be back into Goulburn. We're on Mtn Ash Road now, which heads back towards Goulburn, and you might remember in the first of the three clips here I talked about coming out of Goulburn and finding Mtn Ash Road and driving towards Bungonia. The camera here, the card filled up, and so I didn't get all the return journey, but you would have seen most of the countryside in other videos where I've ridden out to Windelama or Braidwood or Tarago. So there's not a lot here to talk about that is remarkably different from what you've already seen. I will say thank you to those who have watched, and thank you to those who have subscribed to my channel. I hope you had a nice Christmas with your family, and I hope that the audio quality here is better, and therefore holds the audience's attention for longer than the other audio. So thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll be posting more motorcycle videos or something else shortly that you'll find interesting.